July 5th, 1621. Dear Imp, we had to wait until the moon was full to go eeling, and then Father and I had to arrange for Mistress Hannah Potts to come over and stay with Blessing. We go with Squanto to the great pond that connects with the sea. There be a place between the pond and the sea where the water narrows into a river. Squanto has brought 2 eel traps. Father tells me I must stand in the bushy reeds that grow at the edge and not to get my feet wet. Why, Master Whipple? Squanto asked. Mistress Pudding would be good at wading and beating the water. But Father explains that it not be proper for young girls to bare their ankle and wet their skirts in such a manner. He gives me a long branch, however, so I can reach over and beat from the banks. Father wades up toward the pond and beats while Squanto stands at the trap and waits. The moonlight being so bright, I can clearly see as if it were daylight, and soon notice a stirring in the water, and even the darkest shapes. I am in charge of getting them into the baskets as Squanto and my father bring them up from the trapping. They slither and flop and catch the moonlight on their glistening dark skins. Some we shall turn into eel pie, a favorite of ours. A portion, however, will be salted and dried and put in the keg to go back to England for the merchants to sell. Love, Mem. July 26, 1621. Dear Imp, for some time now, though, I did not want to say anything for sure. I think that there be an attraction between my father and Mrs. Potts. I am not sure how I feel about it, quite honestly. On one hand, I would be most terribly disturbed if Father became like Hummy's father, trying to speak to Mam through folks who had half dead, and be more interested in heaven than it was here on earth, namely me and Blessing in this house that is so tight and our garden, which is doing so well. Yet on the other hand, it seems soon after Mam's death. I do realize, however, that Edward Winslow remained barely a month after his father passed on. After his wife passed on. Still, I don't know. I mean, Mistress Potts seems nice enough, but she is strange. Of course, it is understandable after all she has been through. She is so quiet. That is the hardest. She hardly ever says a word. I have worked with her planting in the fields right next to her, and she never speaks. If she feels I am doing something wrong, she never objects directly to the way of what I am doing. She never says it out loud, but she will just go over and do it again. I almost rather have her say that that is not right. She is very placid, too. Never smiles. I'm just not sure if she would really fit in here with us. It's not as if we're wrecks, but she is still the stillness that goes beyond reason. Perhaps with Father she is not so still. I can't imagine how he would be drawn to her. Love, Mem. August 1st, 1621. Dear Imp, Father has made me a stool, Imp, just for me. I think I might be the only child in the settlement to have a stool all to her own, and it be the first piece of real furniture in our house. We have not bed nor table. We have a barrel for our table. We do not count shelves or pegs as furniture. It is so dear of him. He is making a real spoon for Blessing. There are hardly any other spoons or forks in the entire settlement. I do not know when he found the time for this work. We are so busy from dawn till darkness, what with tending in the gardens and the fields, and at least every other day he goes fishing, and when we're not doing one of those chores we are making nets for the fishermen. I have never worked so hard before. This is why I can only get to writing to you every few days or so. It will get worse as the time of harvest nears. Already I can feel the light being sliced off the day's end, just a tiny sliver at a time. But think of it, Imp. I have my stool and shall sit by the fire on it at the winter's eve. If only Mam were here, how cozy it would be. I wonder if one ever grows old enough to not miss her mother. Love, Mem. August 2nd, 1621. Dear Imp, guess who else has a stool? Air Nose. Love, Mem. August 5th, 1621. Dear Imp, here's something else I do not like about Mistress Hannah Potts. She tisks when she doesn't like something or the manner in which something is being done. I was working with her in the pea patch today, and I heard her tisking and tasking the sound. At first I thought it'd be a gigantic annoying mosquito, but no, it was Hannah Potts, sticking her little tongue between her lips, tisking away at things I was snipping off at the pea pods. She then tissed very loudly and said, "Like this." That was all. A tisk and 2 words. I don't like that. It's very irritating. Love, Mem. August 9th, 1621. Dear Imp, I feel simply terrible. I hope Mam in heaven was not looking on, but undoubtedly she was. After 4 days in the pea patch with Hannah Potts and her tisking, I turned to her and said, "Can't you just say what I'm doing wrong? Tell me, instead of tisking and clicking with your tongue." Well, her face did crumple right before me. Her lovely gray eyes swam in tears, and she fled the field. And if I didn't feel bad enough then, I found here what I returned, a note folded. Here's what it said. Dear Remember, I am so sorry to have tissed you as you have described. It is not good of me, and this might be very hard for you to understand, but since my dear husband died and my baby, too, is now buried at his side, I have had a very hard time speaking. I cannot always put my thoughts into words. I am getting better, but speech comes very hard for me. My tisk sound does not really always denote criticism. With the peas, it is nothing that you are doing wrong, but in fact that so many of them seem scorched. Our yield be so small for all the work we have done, but I cannot think how to express it. I know you are a patient child, and will now understand better my affliction. May God's blessing be upon you, Hannah Potts. She knows I am a patient child, Imp? Oh dear, I be mortified. The poor thing. Love, Mem. August 15th, 1621. Dear Imp, I went out today to field near the pond where Father and Squanto and I had gone eeling. I picked a lovely bunch of wildflowers. They be New World wildflowers, so I know not the name, but they make a lovely bouquet. As I stared down at them, I thought this would be a nice thing to do for Mistress Potts. So I stuck them in our smallest pinkin with water and left them in her house with a note. For over a week now I have been trying to think of a way to make up for my rudeness. I know this cannot make up really, but perhaps it shows a better aspect of me. Love, Mem. August 20th. Dear Imp, there is more talk these days than about an expedition to the Massachusetts province. Father is to be included. Everyone is very excited. The only problem is that it will leave us short-handed at a very busy time of the year, harvest. This is when I wish more than ever that I be a boy and could go with them. Love, Mem. August 25th, 1621. Dear Imp, today I was out in the field near the large pond. I wandered to the inland end of the pond and heard children laughing. It could have been our Pilgrim children, for when Indian children laugh it does sound just like ourselves, which makes me think all children on earth must laugh alike. I crept closer and crouched down in the berry bushes and peered through. There, with the lily pads growing so thick, a half a dozen Indian children were swimming and diving. When they came up, they clutched the roots of water lilies. They are gathering them for something. I shall ask Squanto. But what is amazing to me is that these children are so strong and healthy despite playing about in the water. We have been taught to fear water, not simply because one might drown, but because we think that it washes off the body's natural protection. I am beginning to wonder about this now. I think if it's not true, I should like to learn how to swim. I, of course, would not go naked. Fear not, Imp. I would wear at least 2 petticoats, my waistcoat, and my coif. I would not wear shoes, but yes, stockings. Love, Mem. August 26th, 1621. Dear Imp, I asked Squanto about the water lily roots. He says they are dried and pounded into powder that heals stiffness of joints as well as stomach aches. I want to go back there. I am haunted by it. I have figured out a better swimming dress. I would wear my 2 petticoats and my blouse, but not the waistcoat. I would then tie the 3rd petticoat under my arms, smock style, which would be as modest as the waistcoat, but allow more movement. Love, Mem. September 1st, 1621. Dear Imp, we have been so busy gutting, salting, and packing fish in barrels that I have not had time to get back to the water lily place until yesterday, and there was no one there. I was almost bitterly disappointed, but then in walking closer to the pond's edge I found a narrow but well-worn path. So I began to follow it and came upon a very small cluster of wigwams. This must be the one settlement that Squanto had told Father and me about on the night when we went eeling. He had said that this was a good summer camp, for the people were near where the eels swam and not too far to dig the clams on the beach and gather the crabs. There was good clay here, too, for a small creek and river that runs nearby. I have never seen so closely the wigwam houses of the Indians. They are like lovely wooden bowls turned upside down with coverings of bark. They have racks with strings of drying quinquags and other fish. I saw one woman shaping a pot of clay. I want to go back again. How I wish Hummy were here. Once we felt the eyes at the rim of the forest peering at us, but now I am the eyes, and I am looking at them, and it be such a different world I do see. Love, Mem. September 4th, 1621. Dear Imp, I went out again today. This time I was able to follow 2 women to the riverbed. There were more Indian children digging clay, and the children were splashing and swimming in the cloudy water too. I am becoming convinced that water cannot hurt one that much. I must figure out a way to learn how to swim. Love, Mem. September 6th, 1621. Dear Imp, the most astonishing thing happened today. Once more I went to the water lily place and followed the narrow path and then crouched in the bushes to watch the activity in the summer camp. And guess what, Imp? I was discovered. By Squanto, no less. I felt so embarrassed to be found peeping in like that. I didn't know what to say. so I just blurted out how curious I was and how unfair it seemed to me that only the men ever got to go out and meet with the Indians. And just like that, Squanto said, "Come with me." He took me right into the camp and introduced me to the Indians. I think the children were just as curious about me as I was about them, for they did gather around me and touch my skirts and apron. Their mothers tried to reprimand them, for this was considered too forward, I guess. But I smiled and took off my apron. I handed it to one little girl so she could see it. Another pointed to my coif. "Well, imp, I know it 'tis be unbelievable, but I took it off and let her try it on. Everybody did gasp when they saw my hair. It had turned so bright since I had been careless about wearing my cap. They brought me right into one of their wigwams. It was the loveliest time. I was in this dome of shadows with the sweet fragrance of bark and mosses, and 'twas almost as if I were living in the heart of a tree, and there be in this particular wigwam a newborn Indian baby, no more than a few days old, and he be swaddled so carefully in doeskin, and then bound to what Squanto told me is a papoose. They can prop him up anywhere or any place and carry him on their backs, and they gave me some mashed corn in a hollowed-out bowl that had some berries in it, and I did learn so much. I learned that because they have already heard the locusts singing, the time of the frost be near. I learned that they call the insects little people, which I find most dear. I learned that these months, August and September, which they call moons, are called Nepaquish months, which means this time when the corn can be eaten. I have learned so many new words, but this day was indeed my happiest day ever in the New World, and some ways I feel it to be my first day here. Love, Mem.